The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths.
Wow!
For them, an idyllic summer afternoon
Is anybody home?
became a nightmare.
What's wrong with you people?
The events of that day were one of the most bizarre crimes of American history. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls. Prepare for Prattle.
Puny Pod. Welcome to Prattle World. I'm your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider-Dan, and in this podcast I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that a mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to another Puny Pod, a short-form podcast where I revisit or visit a specific film or comic book all by myself. The blood is shed, it's nice and red. Up in the heart of Texas, we are doing Wildstorm's Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2007. It is a comic book this time round. We are looking at a direct sequel to the Platinum Dunes remake of the film. So it's in the same timeline. There's a lot of timelines involved in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. There's, I think, every 2 or 3 films it gets rebooted for the most part, which is, mostly the case, and is the case for many a slasher franchise. But yeah, we're going to be looking at this specifically, but I'm just going to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in general first of all. I kind of found out about this film around, I think it was the late 90s, early noughties, where I was kind of hearing about films and stuff, and I heard that it was quite a big deal in the UK that this film, the original film anyway, the Tobe Hooper, Kim Henkel, Gunnar Hansen, Marilyn Burns original 1974 film was getting an uncut release. The BBFC, it's considered as one of the video nasties of its day, and was quite a big deal for the BBFC to turn around on that and release the film in its uncut original form. So that was quite a big deal, and obviously there was a big release, there was a DVD, there was everything, video, VHS, just a lot of kind of, there was documentary. I think it was shown on Channel 4, and I think Mark Kermo did an introductory video on it as well. So I think I saw it kind of one night late, and it's fantastic. It's an absolute classic. I've talked about it before with Rasheen and how much I love that film, how gritty and grimy and dirty it looks on screen, and how brutal, doesn't show you that much actually really on screen as well, but it's just the feeling, the atmosphere of that particular franchise is unique, completely unique into itself. I didn't include it in my beginning slasher films because I don't really see it, even though arguably Leatherface is a slasher villain. I didn't feel like it was in that genre particularly. I see more of, because it's more of a family-based thing, it's this cannibal thing, and it's this deep kind of backwoods type film. I put it in that genre. I put it in the backwoods, the hicksploitation, whatever you want to call it, that type of film. Your Deliverances, those type of things, your Wrong Turns. It's in that wheelhouse and that world for me, and not necessarily so much the classic slasher tropes that we were looking at that particular time and in that particular podcast. But we are going to talk about video nasties a little later in the year with Dennis, so that'll be an interesting discussion. But yeah, I've not seen all of the films, I will say that, but I think with a new one coming out very soon, I'm going to check some of them out, the ones I haven't seen, which is a fair few, actually. For this particular podcast, I've watched the 2003, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the 2006, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning, which is a prequel to that film. And this is a direct sequel, and this is made in 2007. So that kind of timeline had been set. Those characters had been put down on paper, on the big screen, on the silver screen. So we knew what they were about. And this particular family, in this iteration, they seem to be named something different in every kind of timeline to differentiate them. So in this one, they're known as the Hewitts, the Hewitt family. And in the original, it's the Sawyers. And I think in another film, they're known as the Slaughter family. There's a lot of license taken. The main thing is there's obviously a chainsaw involved. There's obviously Leatherface is involved. But everything else is kind of, there's a cannibal element and, all the stuff being made out of skin and that. But usually those are the main elements, and everything else gets kind of changed about a bit or moved or, whatever you want. But this comic is written by the team DNA. If you're familiar with them, they were a writing duo. They no longer work together for whatever reason, creative differences. I don't know. Did they have a falling out? Possibly. But they wrote this. So that's Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. So I believe that's right. Yes, I've got that right. And they wrote this. We did look, again, speaking of Dennis, we did look at the other Wildstorm comics they were putting out at the time. So they bought the rights to Nightmare on Elm Street. So we saw that in the Clone Wars comparisons we had with Friday the 13th. I won't spoil that. Go back and check that podcast out and see who wins out of those two comics. Who knows? People who've already listened, they'll know. Here we go. So this sequel comic book picks up about a year roughly after the events of the first film in 2003. So again, it is a sequel to that film, not the prequel or anything else. So in this, if you're spoilers for that film, but it ends with Arlie Ermey plays one of the characters in the film. He plays Sheriff Hoyt, also known as Charlie Hewitt Jr., because he's in on the whole thing and he's involved with the family. And he gets run over several times via Jessica Biel's character, Erin, who it runs over him several times. So he's dead. Not unlike the hitchhiker at the end of the first film. Full on, just dead, just really dead. So he couldn't come back, obviously, so they couldn't do a film sequel to that. And obviously, Leatherface also has one of his arms removed. However, by the majesty of comic books, we can have this story. Obviously, the severed arm would probably have caused some issues for the actors, and there'd be maybe CGI or practical effects or something, and it might be a safety hazard with, when you're chucking around a chainsaw. I used to work in Scarefest, and one year at the end of the maze, you would reach this one point, and it was very much a Leatherface butcher type character, and they would have a chainsaw. And it would be a real chainsaw, but it's obviously has the chain removed, and they would just rev it up, and obviously it gets going. And I'll be honest, it was the scariest part of the maze, and I went through it. We tested it out, and it was still, it always got the effect it needed. There was another ending that I had to kind of workshop a little bit, which was this puppet alien thing, which I had to kind of figure something out, which I did, and then I just kind of passed it on to everybody else, and people loved it. It was kind of like I was like, you've completed the maze and now this is your prize. And then I go away, turn this thing on, and then I activate the puppet. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But the chainsaw was always the better ending. You always wanted the chainsaw, no matter what. The puppet was okay, but it was just awkward, really. But we did our best with it. Anyway, I should talk about that comic. Eventually, I'll get there. There was this huge bulking guy called Dimitri, who is a lovely lad as well, but he was absolutely the kind of Leatherface you would want. And he did have a kind of a mouth guard, not unlike the way he looks in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. It's got that kind of half mask, kind of almost like Hannibal Lecter-esque kind of thing going on, if I remember it rightly. But I remember they had to put pins in because it was in the shipping container. There wasn't enough air getting in, and obviously all these fumes that are coming off this chainsaw was making the people who were operating them, Dimitri included, get really fucking faint and almost pass out. So they had to start, they had to literally, because it's just pure steel, they had to just poke holes in it, whatever metal it was, and so he could breathe. Anyway, long story short, that just came to me then, but I am going to talk about this comic now. So we pick up. There's kind of the cops chasing this guy down. He's got this, who we find out is Zeke Hewitt, which is a new character, not within the films, and he's driving and trying to steal this kind of truck full. And it turns out they stop him. They knock him off the road. I think they shoot his tire out. He's throwing off all of the police officers. And then they open the back door and they find all these bodies. And a lot of them do look quite similar to the victims from the previous film. I don't know how long they've been in there, but it looks like they've been in there a long time. There's a faceless guy who's Erin's boyfriend in the first film. And there's his mate as well. He's got kind of this kind of little beard going on as well. And then we also see a kind of flashback of later on of Erin cutting the arm off of Leatherface. But Leatherface basically attacks, kills all the police officers. The story picks up a few weeks after that, and the FBI are investigating the cold case of the murders, the Hewitt family and everything, and just trying to kind of figure it out. And basically, they determine that it is still ongoing. It hasn't stopped. And this one stretch of road, this one little town is they determined that because of all the inbreeding that has gone on and the contamination of the bloodline, it is feasible that the whole town is in on the killings and in on the conspiracy for human flesh, because this factory is shut down. It's in economic depression. You see a lot of this. Again, a lot of this is kind of set up in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning as well. You kind of see a lot of this, and you kind of see the key kind of moments and kind of realizations and stuff that come through. I don't actually think either of those films are particularly bad. I don't think they're particularly great, but I think that they're fine. They do what they say on the tin. If you're into that sort of thing, then I'm sure it's for you. Is it as good as the original? Well, no. I'm quite partial to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 as well, if you want to give that a go. But a lot of the others I have not seen. I'll be honest, I've not seen 3, 4, the Alexandria Daddario version. I think that was 3D. And then the prequel to that one as well, I've not seen either. I've not seen the new one as of yet. But yeah. So the FBI are investigating this cold case, and one of the people on the team is actually the uncle of the hitchhiking girl in the 2003 film. So he is out for revenge. He's looking for the people that did this to his niece, and he is kind of done some dodgy stuff to get on this particular team, because obviously massive conflict of interest. He would not be on this team. There's no fucking way. But they discover that there's a tunnel system that underground under this whole town that all leads and all converges back to the Hewitt residence. And they find more and more bodies, fresher bodies, and they are determined to kind of figure this out, because initially they're just supposed to find some clues, warm up the case again, and take it kind of at face value and just be like, right, let's just get the gears moving again on this case, and maybe we can find something, because it is. But then they just find so much evidence. They're like, this is huge. This is much bigger than we ever expected. All the amount of bodies and things they're discovering. They find Sheriff Hoyt's kind of office, and it's just wall-to-wall evidence of stuff, and nothing's been touched as well. And they were like, this is a cold case, what's going on here? It kind of doesn't really link that well in regards to being a sheriff, because continuity-wise anyway, because the team that are investigating. They meet a sheriff, and he's like, here's the files, here's everything you need to know. And the way they talk about it is that Hoyt had always been the sheriff almost, or that he was a genuine police officer. But in the beginning, he's more like he's masquerading as one, because they're like, we've got no money, there's nobody else lives in this town but you and the Hewitts. So I'm leaving, I'm off to work somewhere else. So he kills him and kind of takes over his role and becomes Sheriff Hoyt. He even gets to a point where he's like, don't call me Charlie Jewett Jr., call me that. Call me Sheriff Hoyt. I've got to stay in this character. I've got to, What is cool is that a lot of two of the FBI agents are named after Kim Henkel, who co-wrote Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Tobe Hooper, the original 1974 version. And also, there's a reporter that turns up later in the story who is named, surname is Burns, which again is a nod to Marilyn Burns, who played Sally Hardesty in the original film, The Final Girl in that. So it was amazing as well. One of my favourite final girls. If you want to hear more about me on Sally Hardesty, Marilyn Burns, check out my podcast about the top 5 Scream Queens I did with Machine, One Shock Phobia Fest. It's a good one, so check that out. But yeah, it's an interesting story, because if you're looking for a lot of Leatherface, there is not that much. And I think the issue with, obviously, one of the best things about these slasher villains is that they don't speak, a lot of them, other than really Freddy. They don't tend to speak a lot, and I think that adds to the idea that they cannot be reasoned with, they cannot be talked to. There's no way you can talk your way out of this. It's life or death. They're gonna kill you. You need to do something about it. And I've always liked that, and I like that in this, there's always, in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's always a surrounding family. I quite like that dynamic. I quite like that idea. And in this iteration, it's very much like, almost like the women are in charge. Like in the original film, it's just like 3 weird fucking guys who probably met at like, the meat packing plant or the butcher or wherever, the slaughterhouse, whatever you want to call it. But in this version, there's a lot of female characters, and I really appreciate that. You've got Luda May, who is the matriarch, I guess, and she really comes into her own in this story, because now that Sheriff Hoyt is dead, she kind of needs to take charge and do what they've been doing for so long. And there's the tea lady, who is oh ma, that lady, and have a cup of tea. There's all of that going on. Like she's really interesting, really creepy, and again, it reminds me a little bit of The Hills Have Eyes as well. I think that might have been done by Platinum Dunes as well, possibly. They bought all the rights to all these. Michael Bay is Platinum Dunes, so he bought all the rights to all these different horror franchises. They did like 1 or 2 films and then just sacked them all off. Really, I think it was a bit of a money making scheme, to be honest. They were just like, people know that name, let's do something in the vein of that and hope it's good. And I don't think any of them, the Platinum Dunes remakes, are particularly bad. I know people don't like the Nightmare on Elm Street one, but I think it's fine. I think it's got some interesting ideas. They take it in a very dark and disturbing way, and it's not the worst thing in the world. I know, obviously, it was going the absolute opposite way at the end of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, where it's just jokes and bizarre goofiness. So I did kind of like the step back and the kind of the waking dreams and stuff. But that's just me. But again, I'm not a massive, I've not been a massive Freddy fan either. Particularly, I'm not a huge Freddy fan. I think I prefer Jason or Michael Myers or even a Leatherface necessarily to Freddy. And I think probably that is due to him talking and to be able to do the one-liners and stuff. As much as I enjoy the one-liners, don't get me wrong. But there is something to be said. And this family is, again, there's more female characters. And I like that element, that, because at the end of the day, you can't have a family, quote-unquote family, without, and arguably, it kind of in the film, it does it in the first film, it kind of introduces the idea that they steal children and steal babies and they raise them, and you see that in Beginnings as well, when like Thomas or Leatherface is a foundling who finds him in the dump, in the rubbish bin, when someone gives birth and dies, basically. He's got a skin condition in this as well, which I wasn't I don't think that's one of my favorite details in this particular version where that is, but yeah, it's one of those. I prefer the idea that he's trying to become other people, or he has these different personalities that are represented by the faces he wears, and it kind of changes his mannerisms, changes the way he is. Like if he wears a woman's mask, you know, becomes more feminine. You know, almost like he's a bit like almost like a trans character, maybe potentially, like a cross dresser or a drag queen or something. I like those elements. You know, they're interesting to me. But anyway, back to the comics. So the FBI are found the bodies, and they're investigating. But all the while, we've also got these reporters as well. So you following the reporters, doing a report on the killing, surprise, surprise. And the reporter reads out John Larroquette's basically his intro for the entire his narration for the entire film in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake 2003 version. He's coming back to do the narration for the new one and did it in the original one. But yeah, and they read it word for word, so that's quite a nice nod. But yeah, it's great. It's quite a good book, I think, because it doesn't just do your standard teens, because that would be the easy thing, would be to be just do the teens drive into the town again, do the whole fucking thing again. But no, at least they're kind of they're paying homage, they're making kind of links. They're introducing new family members like Zeke and Shiloh and Hank as well. I think it's Hank. So yeah, so it's really, really, really interesting. I forgot to mention the artist as well. I think the art is actually pretty good. It's quite kind of standard, what I kind of would expect. It's not too. It's got enough character, and I quite like there's a framing device where he uses. So I think it's Wes Craig. Yeah, he went on to co-create the Deadly Class, which is the teenage boys and girls in a kind of assassin school type thing. So he's no stranger to the gore and the violence. But as I'm aware, I think it's the thing he struggles with as an artist the most. But yeah. That's right. So yeah, he has a unique style. And the framing device, it kind of has like it's interesting because he has all his panels and everything, all the placing is quite unique. It's almost like he's trying to use the way the title looks from the original film. He's trying to recreate that by using his panels, which is interesting, and this kind of scratchier kind of aspect of it I really enjoyed and really dug. So it was something really interesting about that. And this white kind of background, it's almost like the sketch is almost coming out at the sides. So over the top you can see like the kind of what the sketch version would have looked like. It just kind of almost ekes out the side on the sides, even though it's fully rendered and coloured and inked and everything. Right at the bottom or to the left, or on the edges of the page, you can kind of see the sketch version, which I quite liked. Kind of adds a little more detail, and it's kind of a bit rough around the edges, which I think this book kind of needs to be. But it's not as it's quite detailed. I like the colouring. I like the way it looks. I think it's really grim and gritty, and I think it needs to be, without being too much or over the top. I think there's a nice level of that happening here, which I really appreciate. But yeah, we find out Baines is the uncle of Pepper, I think she's called, the character. I'm not sure if she's called that in the film or not, but he goes on a kind of a one-man killing spree. One of the agents gets killed by Leatherface. I think he gets chopped in half. Again, it is minimal Leatherface, so if you're expecting a lot of Leatherface, there is not a lot of that. But there is more of the family, which I find quite interesting. Like Shiloh's like a really mentally deficient character who ends up kind of biting the dust. There is some epic kind of action towards the kind of tail end. There's a nice kind of slow, build up. As long as you can get through those first two or three issues, which is all kind of story for the most part, but it is worth it. I actually think I really enjoyed this on the whole. I think it's a decent kind of sequel to what we got given in those two films within this particular kind of franchise or timeline, whatever you want to call it. I think it does do what it needs to do and builds on that. The reporter and her friends are investigating I think it's the Blair meatpacking plant, which is where Leatherface used to work. So it got closed down, and then they're going back, and there's a character who looks just like Arlie Ermy or Sheriff Hoyt, and apparently the artist Wes Craig said it was a deliberate choice to make him look like Arlie Ermy. He's called Hank Hewitt, we believe. Not a lot of detail about him, but he works there and he's taking the piss, and he looks exactly like he looks just like Arlie Ermy. So it's theorized, but nothing's ever been stated whether it's a twin maybe, or another family member, like a brother or something, or maybe it's that character and he's survived. I doubt it, because it has a different name or something, but it was theorized that it might be him, or he could have survived possibly. I mean, it's a kind of, it's obviously it's a horror film, so wouldn't surprise us really. And we see he has an amazing he basically gets the reporters, kills them all. He's got I think it's Kim Burns, she's called, the reporter, the main reporter. He has her hung up while she kills her friend, like skins him and then boils him, all sorts of disgusting, horrible stuff, which is what you'd expect from this franchise. But there you go. And he comes a cropper when Baines is looking for his other teammates. One has been taken off by the tea lady because she's always trying to drug people with their tea. She's like, "Oh, have some tea," with Henrietta Hewitt, who is the short-haired woman from the film and is looking after the babies, wants a baby. There's a really disturbing scene with them where they tie him up and try and with the drug guy and try and basically they rape him. They jump on him and they're like, they want a baby, I want a baby, and all that sort of stuff, which is, again, very disturbing and portrayed and drawn kind of almost like, it's almost like he's swirling, his vision is swirling like a cup of tea or something, like when you're spinning, which I thought was really well done, obviously, because it's the tea lady. But yeah, really, really disturbing stuff. And again, obviously, you got to have the dinner scene. What was interesting about the 2003 version is they don't have a dinner scene, which I thought was interesting. And again, there's enough changes with that and having the police officer and more of the town involved. I thought they did enough changes, enough unique spins on it. I think it was a bit too wet, though. It didn't remind me of this kind of dry, dust bowl-y kind of Texas, this dry heat. It was just, everything was just dripping all the time and seemed really wet, and I just didn't really understand it. I was like, you've got a really horrible leak if that's going on. The house would fall down under itself, but there you go. Yeah, it's great. It's disturbing, but Baines ends up saving the reporter just at the last minute because he's the Hank character is running after Kim with a chainsaw. It's like run, 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 all that sort of stuff. And he rocks up, manages to shoot him, but then they get into an epic chainsaw duel, just like in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I am the Lord of the Harvest, said Dennis Hopper in that film, and it's great, and it's exactly what I want. I want to see a chainsaw duel. Why wouldn't you want a chainsaw duel? In a Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, it's stupid, it's weird. Obviously, chainsaws would not operate very well realistically, but if you're running around and banging them into things so much, they're useless in that regard. But yeah, it was epic. It was really, really cool. And then you get the family dining scene. You get this whole tunnel system where they chop the tunnel system and collapse it on one FBI agent, and then he comes up while they're having dinner and he gets attacked by all the family members that aren't Hank or Leatherface they've got Monty, who's the guy who doesn't have any legs in the film. The paraplegic, and he basically gets whacked by a pan, and he gets the worst. He gets pretty bad kill. I think it's a throat slash. So yeah, but they all end up. Most of the survivors end up in this. Again, they end up on the dinner table, and they're like, okay, we're gonna have this, and boiling people over and stuff. it's good stuff. You know, it's really fun. It's effective. I really enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend it if you're a fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre in general. I think if you're a fan of specifically the remake and maybe the beginning as well, it's definitely something to look at. It is not that widely available. They are out of print. Obviously, Wildstorm has been folded into DC Comics at the moment, so any of those stuff. But obviously, the rights, much like the films, the rights just kind of go all over the show. So Avatar Press have done some. Various other kind of comic companies are all over the show. So you could end up paying a pretty penny for this. I think I paid about like 20 quid for it, something like that. But there is a book 2, and much like Friday the 13th, there's a book 2. But Nightmare on Elm Street, there was only one book apparently, so who knows? Some really good stuff, and the table. It's probably the most exciting kind of table scene we've had in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. Ends with quite a literal bang as someone comes in with Baines comes in with a grenade and says, "Don't fuck with me. I'll pull this grenade. I'll throw it at everybody." And and then Leatherface chops it up, and Shiloh, who is the mentally deficient one, basically just jumps to grab the grenade for some reason, and. But there's a lot of characters here, and I know later on they introduce a few characters that are more similar to the Sawyer clan, the Sawyer family from the original films. It's something. It's a good comic. If you can get hold of it, again, it is quite rare. However, I have found a link where you can read it online. So what I will do is I will leave that in the show notes. This is a note for me mostly to leave it in the show notes. But if you want to read it online, you should be able to via this link. I've used the website before. It doesn't seem too bad, but I'll leave it on there if you want. If you want to go for it, you can go for it. If not, you can buy it yourself. It's fine. But yeah, try eBay, try Amazon. But I really enjoyed it. I think it does everything that I want it to do. Everything looks right. They've obviously done a lot of research. They're referencing all the right things. What happened, the kind of stuff. There's a lot of influences from the original films as well, I think. But yeah, I think it's a solid film. It's a solid comic book that kind of, again, harkens back to those original films, but then still appreciates the timeline and all the sort of stuff going on. After this, there was only, much like the Friday the 13th comic, they made kind of several one-offs and one-shots. I've not read those, so I can't say the quality is good or bad, but again, you can buy it as well, book 2. Give it a try. But I've quite enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to revisiting those other films and kind of getting stuck in. But yeah, I absolutely, totally dug this, and like I said, I will leave that link to see if you guys want to read it. That's cool. But I would recommend it. I think it's cool to see a lot of the characters from the films in the comic as well. They don't just like, oh, it's new or different or killed them off or they don't exist. You get Jedediah as well, who's the little boy who helps the Erin, Jessica Biel's character in the original film as well. So yeah, it's been great. I've really enjoyed this. I've had a good laugh with this comic book. The reason I did was because myself, Andy and Natalie, both of the guests this month, have been ill, and I didn't want you guys missing out on a podcast, so I thought I'd just very briefly just talk about this one. But yeah, really good comics. So if you can get hold of it, 2007 Wildstorm's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Book 1, Volume 1, whatever you want to call it. Jump on eBay, jump on Amazon, or jump on the link I'm going to leave in my show notes, and you can give it a go. But I had a blast reading this. It was good. Did it in one sitting. It's not a hard read. It wasn't hard going. The writing is good. The art is good. Not much more to say, really. Give it a go if you're interested, but be warned, not much Leatherface in there. So yes, just bear that in mind before you start reading. But when he is on the panel, on the pages, he is used very well. He's intimidating. He's scary. I think there's a problem with getting Leatherface right. I think you need him to be large, powerful, insane, but then you also want the vulnerability to it as well, that he's not quite mentally well. And I think if you don't get that balance right of him being intimidating, threatening, and deadly, he can become a bit of a joke. He can just be like a big crybaby or a bit soppy or a bit stupid or easily manipulated. I think you've got to find that balance to nail that character. And I think there's only a few. There's, a lot of actors have played him, obviously, same with Halloween as well, or Friday the 13th. It's a mask character. You're just going to get a different person under the mask. But I like the version in this continuity. It's Andrew Bryanarski, who he's the Chip Shrek in Batman Returns. I think it was Butterbean or Butterball in Hudson Hawk, which we talked about, and he was also Zangief in the Street Fighter film. So I thought he was fantastic. Powerful, intimidating. I like the design of that first Leatherface mask in that first film. I think is really good. I love how tight and pulled back it is. But yeah, I think I've talked about all that as much as I possibly can. So we'll call it a day. But I'm glad that you visited the heart of Texas with me and pulled it right out. Got it proper churned up by that chainsaw. So thank you very much for that. You can find me on the social medias. It's at Secret Boars on Facebook, Twitter at Dan_Boars, Instagram it's at SpiderDan Secret Boars. Like, share, comment, subscribe, etc. And don't forget to use the hashtag #PrepareForPrattle when you interact with us. And if you want to join the Prattalion and to be briefed in full on the Secret Boars, head over to Prattle World on the World Wide Web. So that's www.spiderdanandthesecretboars.com. I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon. I am Jax Musings, Paul Meller, Max Byrne, Tony Farina, Scott Hodgson, Simon Cottam for their continuing donations. It is very much appreciated and helps Prattle World keep on turning. And if you ever find yourself in a position to help the podcast, please consider it. Thank you very much for your time. Take care, guys. Goodbye.